Hi, this is Mike G, Marganon as I'm also known, and we're here with Mike D. And today we're going to talk about rock and roll bands that didn't quite make it. They were bands that were just as good as the popular bands, the big bands but they just for whatever reason had some kind of problem, didn't quite make it. There's a saying that for every popular act there's maybe 100 that didn't make it, and that doesn't necessarily mean they weren't as good. It's just for whatever reason, the fates were not with them.
Exactly.
As whatever it may be. So now, Mike, I know that you know a little bit about a certain makeup band from the 70s, a very cliche kind of makeup band.
I'm a Kiss fanatic.
Yeah, okay, we know that.
Yeah.
But Kiss's management, I should say, also had a few other bands in their stable. Why don't you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, their manager, Bill O'Coin, was trying to create a dynasty and be a Svengali.
Yes.
And he overreached terribly, and he signed way too many bands. And they ran out of money at Casablanca Records, but they tried to get Angel in, and they dressed all in white. And they were heavily influenced with keyboards and progressive rock.
Mm-hmm.
So it was different than Kiss. And they had magic tricks in their act. And initially, Casablanca, around 75, really pushed a lot of time and energy into Angel. And they actually ended up doing 5 albums throughout the 70s.
Yeah, but would you say all of them were progressive rock?
No, I think they had trouble getting on the radio and getting their albums beyond like numbers 80 on the charts.
Yeah.
They were on the lower levels of the charts. So they moved into pop rock. They tried a power ballad. They tried a Christmas song. They ended up doing light pop metal. I mean, they tried so many different things.
What other things did they try to do to promote Angel's career?
Being in an opening band was a really big deal for Angel. So you might see a major group like Bad Company or Boston, and then the opening band to a huge audience would be Angel. And they were in a movie called Foxes. They featured in 2 songs, and the movie did well, but unfortunately it did not propel them to any further success. They tried a live album that worked for Kiss, but it was called Live Without a Net, and it didn't quite work.
And what label was that soundtrack on?
Casablanca.
Now I don't think they were on that same label, but who else was in Bill O'Coin's stable? There was another band that's of note.
Stars.
Oh, yes. You mean with a Z? Stars with a Z?
Stars with a Z, and this was also in 75. The only difference is they had a real nice looking guy with shaggy hair, a little rough looking, Michael Lee Smith. Great singer, performer, right?
Yeah. Was he related to anybody we know?
Rex Smith, who was a teen idol.
Yeah, only people from our generation would remember.
His brother made it as a teen idol, but he had a chipped tooth and he never fixed. It was just one of those things that Stars should have done, but they did not. They toured heavily. They made lots of albums. They worked really hard. A little bit more of a guitar rock edged band. Not the keyboards and the flowing costumes of Angel.
But Stars came from the ashes of something else, didn't they?
You're right, they did. There was a band that had a hit song with Brandy, which is a massive song, and they were called Looking Glass.
Right.
And so 1 or 2 of the guys came over from Looking Glass, but they didn't want that known. They did not want to play Brandy.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh.
No, they wanted to start fresh with a whole new thing. And they had some weird songs with lyrics that were controversial, like Pull the Plug, which is like taking someone off of a coma and so they would die. I mean, that's not going to get them on the radio with songs like that.
Violation.
They did have one hit single called Cherry Baby.
Oh, I love that song.
And it made it up to 33 on the charts, but they were bigger in the Midwest, so it might have charted higher in the Midwest. I'm sure it did. But during the taping of that song and another one, they had a huge fight with Bill O'Coin, their manager, and the drummer tried to assault him. And it had to do with them cutting out parts of the video in the song. And this was a surprise to stars. All of a sudden, it's being cut. So they had a huge fight in the studio, and that did hurt their career with management.
Yeah, and when you say fight, you mean like fist fight, like a brawl. Like
Yeah, it was a brawl.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. But
And
you can watch the videos. They're called Sing It, Shout It, and Cherry Baby. And the fight was in the middle of those two.
and you know, when I remember Stars growing up, I think what blew it for me was that their record covers weren't clear. I mean, 70s had some fantastic record covers, and they always used this airbrushed kind of thing, this fantasy look. But I don't think we bought their albums because we didn't know if they were a disco band or something. We were afraid it might be disco, and we didn't want to buy that. So that might have been a big mistake that they made.
They had an album called Attention Shoppers, and they were standing in a store window like mannequins, and
Yeah,
they were trying to do a joke about their lack of publicity, like, hey, look at us, but it didn't really work. And a bad album cover can really sit in the record store and not be considered cool.
yeah.
Well, I think that teenagers are about being cool.
Well, I think that was the problem with most of their record covers is they didn't convey the genre clearly enough. Even though they were cool covers, they weren't bad though.
Yeah, another band is Head East.
Okay.
They were a hardworking Midwestern band. They were a little different because they finally did make it in the Midwest as like a starring act. They had a proper gold album and a song on FM radio. It's to this day, you can hear it.
And what song is that?
Never Been Any Reason.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful song. And I like bands with keyboards. And they had the keys, great lead singer. But they would open up for like Van Halen and try to work up the crowd and then leave the stage, and Van Halen would take over.
But didn't some big band also cover one of their songs?
Well, they did Since You've Been Gone.
Yeah.
And they did good with it, but Rainbow did it better.
Right.
So if you really want to hear a great song, listen to Rainbow doing Since You've Been Gone. So
ironically, that's my least favorite period of Rainbow's career. Graham Bonnet, sorry, just didn't seem like a good fit for them. But anyway.
But the lead singer ended up becoming a Christian and joined a band called Petra. So if you're into Christian rock, he had a long career with Petra. So too much drugs and alcohol with Head East, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it just didn't pan out. But he did extremely well with Petra.
Oh.
It's a whole different genre, but you know.
Well, Petra was kind of Christian progressive rock, sort of like, weren't they? Kind of.
I think they crossed over a little bit
Yeah.
into the mainstream as well. But there were so many opening bands that came and went. You know.
Well, now let's dip a little further back into the 60s.
Okay.
There was a band that like the most of the bands we're going to be talking about are like bands that rock and roll people know, but maybe not everybody else. These are the big people in rock and roll, like the people in Led Zeppelin or AC/DC. These are the bands they like. You know what I'm saying?
Insiders.
Yeah. So
musicians' favorites.
So there was a band from the 60s that was kind of weird, and a lot of people felt were an influence. Who was it? Spirit?
Spirit was very much instrumental jams and freedom, and you could go in different directions, and they kind of set that template for like a jamming type of band. And out of Spirit, because they broke up, came Jay Ferguson, and he put together a band called JoJo Gunn.
With Mark Andes.
Yeah, and they had a big hit record called Run, Run, Run.
Right.
It's different. It's a different song, but it got them on the radio, which is that key thing. You need that hit record. So JoJo Gunn was pretty big for a while, and when I was reading Paul Stanley's book, his goal was to open for JoJo Gunn. That was the biggest thing. But by the next year, Kiss was a huge stadium band, and JoJo Gunn was opening for them. So that must be kind of weird politics backstage, and JoJo Gunn could not keep the momentum, which is a problem. But Jay Ferguson ended up having a great record solo called Thunder Island. So I remember all throughout the late 70s, Thunder Island If you're ever at the beach or anything and you want a great fun song, that's it.
That's yacht rock, man. That's
Yacht
real
rock.
yacht rock.
Another band I want to mention is Hotel.
Okay.
All right, they worked for 10 years to try to get a record deal, and they were touring, and different members came and went, and they finally got their big record deal, and they got a lot of promotion and push, and an opening slot with the Little River Band. So they're touring the country with the Little River Band. The album Hotel's going up the charts. They had a single called You Got Another Thing Coming. They were kind of power pop, right?
Okay.
Power pop. And then the record company pulls the plug on the financing, pulls them off the tour. And years later, they were like, why did this happen? We were doing so well. And the accounting department said that they needed like a tax loss or a
Oh my
write-off.
gosh.
I know.
Just like
so they
slaughtered them like a sacrificial lamb.
They chose to put them in the accounting loss department, and that was good for their books.
See, that's sickening, but it just goes to show that just rock and roll's a business just like anything else.
But they should have stayed on with Little River Band had they really done that tour. It was about to break in the top 40. Hotel's a great debut album. And they had a second album, right? It's a little bit harder to find, which is a little more rock. So they were given one more chance, but Hotel disappeared into the mist, but a lot of people have been finding them, like me. And that's one you can find. It's, you have to dig, but it's out there.
Well, and then getting back to Spirits, or what happened to JoJo Gunn, actually, there was another founding member who was quite well known, who went on to do some other things, and this is sort of a segue into some of these other bands. Mark Andes, who was the bass player, I remember watching him being interviewed recently, saying how he got kicked out of his own band, a band he started, which was JoJo Gunn, but he went on to be in Firefall, which is more yacht rock, mellow rock, California rock.
They actually made it.
Yeah, no,
Firefall
did pretty well.
Records,
and
right?
what was their big song?
You Are the Woman was pretty huge.
Yeah.
Strange Way to Tell Me You Love Me.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then after Firefall, Mark Andes went on, when Heart went through their big purge, their big program, Mark Andes became their bass player, along with a drummer from a band that I think sort of qualifies in this category, called Montrose. Who had the famous singer Sammy Hagar.
So it's all connected, right?
Yes.
Behind the scenes, and when one group falls apart, there's other bands that will grab them, pick them up. When ELP fell apart, Asia grabbed the drummer. But a few other bands, Mahogany Rush. I don't know a lot about them. They were in Canada, a trio, not to be confused with Rush, right?
And yet we theorize that one or the other may have stolen their name from the other,
They tried so hard for years and years that they just could not get that big hook on the radio.
And who was the main guy in Mahogany Rush? Frank Marino.
Yeah, so that was a Canadian band that tried really hard. A lot of these never got beyond the opening act. And I don't know if you make a whole lot of money as an opening act. It may be hard to sustain. You may be just paying for your expenses at that point. But radio needs to get involved in your career at some point and put you out on 1,000 stations.
Yep.
Right?
Sure.
Get you that big hit record. And then that's free advertising, basically. Any others that we missed?
Yeah, well, then, of course, another category for us in LA is bands that were bigger in the East Coast but never quite made it over here. One example is NRBQ, and most people in LA don't really know of them, but if you ever heard that song "Me and the Boys," that was their big hit. Me and the Boys.
Back then, there were regional acts.
Yeah.
That DJs used to be able to play what they wanted, and you could do that. I always thought Oingo Boingo was an LA band. I don't know how big they got nationwide. I think Weird Science was a big hit.
Yeah, that probably broke them through.
I think they were played a lot more in California, Oingo Boingo, than they may have been across the nation.
And then, of course, you had we can't do one of our videos without mentioning our patron saint Todd Rundgren.
Okay.
Todd Rundgren had a band that was only really popular, although we knew about them out here, but they were only really big in the East Coast, called Utopia. And the Utopia, as we talked about in our prog rock video, was started out as a progressive rock band, but only did about maybe 3 records that would really fall under that category. And Todd Rundgren, being the pop song stylist that he is, turned the band to more of a pop thing. And in the 80s, they became a hugely influential keyboard-based pop band. But I was surprised, Mike. You were telling me that you knew about Utopia back in junior high school, long before I even did.
I subscribed to a rock magazine called Circus, and they were really pushing new wave rock at the time. This was the new thing. And they had a lot of synthesizers. And I remember Adventures in Utopia was a fairly popular album at the time, and some FM stations played it. Did they ever have a breakthrough song? I mean,
Feet Don't Fail Me Now, maybe.
Feet Don't Fail Me Now.
Well, it's certainly one of the weirdest videos ever made.
I love this song. I'm not crazy about the video, but if you want a good laugh, watch Feet Don't Fail Me Now. They did write Love Is the Answer, but that became a hit for England Dan and John Ford Coley.
Oh, well,
they did do that one.
Yep.
So they made some money, because if you write it, you get to make all that money.
There you go.
But if you want to check out 1979 new wavy rock, I would get Adventures in Utopia. I think the song's called The Road to Utopia. That was my favorite song.
Yeah.
From that time.
Yeah, that was when they were just sort of transitioning slightly out of the prog and more into the pop. And that was a great period for them. One of their last official studio record was called POV, and Todd Rundgren was a big advocate of the Mac and Apple Mac.
Okay.
And that whole album was like a kind of an tribute to the Mac. It was all done. The graphics were all done with the Mac, and a lot of the production was done on a Mac.
He was ahead of his time.
Todd was always ahead of his time on that sort of thing.
But just to recap of all we've said, I would recommend Hotel's first album, Adventures in Utopia.
Okay.
From Angel, God, they had so many albums.
But with Todd's little love affair with the Mac ended later on in the 90s, though, because he decided to go on tour as a solo artist with a performance entirely with just him singing and all the music played by a Mac. But unfortunately, the Mac that he chose was a little technically unreliable. And by the end of the show, he ended up smashing it on the floor of Fairfax High School's gym, calling it a bastard machine because it had glitched on him so many times during the performance that he couldn't take it anymore.
It's a temperamental industry.
Well, there's Todd is, of course.
Things happen. But no, just to recap and wind it up. So the debut album from Hotel.
Okay.
Every song's a winner. Angel's debut, probably.
All
the
right.
Tower, right?
Yeah, I've heard it. It's pretty proud.
Maybe Sinful is their pop record.
Okay.
That's where they were trying to do commercial pop. If you want to, it's Sinful. What else? Adventures in Utopia.
Which Stars album has Cherry Baby on it?
Violator.
That's excellent. Great.
Yeah,
excellent.
They peaked with Violator.
Yeah.
So I would, and Sing It, Shout It. So we've given them JoJo Gun, maybe their debut album.
And then I would throw in Montrose's first album, eponymous first album, with Bad Motor Scooter, Rock Candy, Space Station Number 5. That's Sammy Hagar at his best. A lot of people don't like Sammy Hagar, but let me just tell you, give that album a listen if you haven't, because you may change your opinion about him.
So we've given people some good suggestions to go way deep into the woods and find some different treasures, right? That is our goal here. So I'm Mike D at Down Pepper Tree Lane.
And Marganon or Mike G.
Marganon, yeah. Check out my site, downpeppertreelane.com.
Coolio.